Broadcasting from Studio 202 at the Springett Technology Center in Navasota, Texas. It's NOV Live. Now, here's your host, Michael Gaines.
Hello and welcome to NOV Live. I'm Michael Gaines and glad you're joining us today as we bring you a great conversation today with some experts here on NOV Live, as we always do, bringing you technical experts who are helping make an impact in the energy industry. And today's conversation is extra special as we have some conversation around how we can improve drilling safety and increase safe operations in the drilling space. And that's something that I think we all can certainly strive for and appreciate. So going to be a great conversation today. And as always, looking forward to having you be a part of our conversation today. So before we dive in and introduce our guests, I want to, as always, introduce Shelby Dumaine, who is handling our social media desk and doing it well. So Shelby, great to see you today.
Yeah, great to see you as well, Michael, and thank you. And I want to say hello to everybody tuning in right now. And in particular, I wanted to say hello and welcome to our friends on Twitter. This is the first time we are going live on Twitter as well as our normal Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So whether you're watching on any of the four platforms, hello, welcome to the show. I always like to ask, first off, if you want to let us know where you're watching from, where in the world. I always love seeing all the different countries who are tuning in and where in the world our audience is. After that, during the show, if you have any questions for our special guests that are joining us today, feel free to comment below. Again, doesn't matter what platform you're on, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitter, you can comment below your question and we will do a live Q&A at the end of the episode. After the episode, if you still have questions, we will have a few ways you can reach out. The easiest is by emailing us at socialmedia@nov.com if you have any questions about the show. And if you have any questions on the topic we're talking about today, you can go to md.go@nov.com. So those are the two emails you can reach out with any of your questions. You'll hear more about that later. But for today, while we're live, if you have any questions, again, feel free to comment those below and we'll get to as many of those questions as we can. So those are all the ways you can ask us your questions. Now it's time for one of my favorite parts of the show. It's the time where I ask you the question. It's time for the Rig Geek Post of the Week.
Rig Geek's Post of the Week.
All right, and this week's question we're going to have it on the screen, but we are asking you, have the number of drilling safety incidences increased or decreased since the Macondo incident? So if you think you know, go ahead and let us know, simple increased or decreased, and we will reveal the answer at the end of the episode after we do that live Q&A. All right, and that's all from me. I'll go back to you, Michael, for the show.
All right, thanks, Shelby. So today's conversation, as we mentioned at the top of the show, is talking about ways we can increase and, in effect, have a positive impact on safe drilling operations. And so to talk about that with us, we have some special guests with us today on NOV Live. I have sitting beside me Jeremiah Meyers, who's the development leader at DrillSage. We have Ramon Rodriguez, who's the Director of Business Development at NOV, and we have Jesse Roye, who is the co-founder and CFO of DrillSage. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Mike.
So to kind of kick us off and talk about our conversation broadly, we're talking about drilling operations and really, I think in many aspects, many have observed that we have had a very challenging time in the energy industry. And when you're looking at COVID, loss of industry personnel, I think one study by Deloitte figures that somewhere in the neighborhood of 107,000 chemical and oil and gas jobs that have been lost in just a 6-month period in 2020. That is all played a role in the impact on operations overall, and specifically on the impact of drilling challenges and risks. One of the aspects that I know is a paramount for anyone in the industry is finding ways to have safe operations. full stop, period. How do you have safe operations, and how are you able to really positively impact that? And I know that we're going to all talk about that. Ramon, I just maybe want to lead off with you. I know that that is top of mind, of course, for anyone, certainly here at NOV and your team as well. How do you look at that, and what are some of the things that you and others have been able to maybe accomplish or start out to help in that regard?
So from the technology provision standpoint of view, we are looking always at ways to support our customers, drilling contractors and our operators to have more efficient operations and also safer operations. And we've started this collaboration with DrillSage, who are bringing great technology and expert systems to provide predictability and safer operations.
Okay.
So the broad term, that's what we're doing.
Yeah. Yep. And so I know we've now mentioned the phrase DrillSage a couple times. Jesse, do you mind just kind of high level for folks that may not be familiar? DrillSage, what is that?
That's a great question, Michael. Let me make it very simple. DrillSage is an expert system that reduces the risk of drilling operations. It's just that simple.
Right.
Let me explain a little bit in detail. DrillSage software is designed to be a proactive system. Most systems today are reactive. A proactive system that we have created in DrillSage is able to, in real time, identify and analyze and detect developing conditions downhole that lead to problems.
Right. Okay.
Typically, we're able to do this hours in advance of the problems reaching the critical point and degenerating into a big problem.
Right. So great segue. So let's talk about that. So we've said that the collaboration with NOV and DrillSage, the goal is to help reduce the incidents that we have during operations. So maybe let's maybe kind of take a step back. So when we're looking at operations on the rig and drilling operations, what are some of the incidents that we're seeing in that space? And I'll lead off with you, Jesse.
Okay. One of the things that we see, I mean, there are a lot of incidents that can go south on a rig, but one of the things that we focus on are a number of major categories. Specifically, one of the major categories is stuck pipe. In some cases, as much as 5% of a company's wells wind up in the irretrievably stuck pipe category. That represents a huge capital investment, lost time. In addition to that, you have fluid influxes, you have overpull issues, you have lost circulation. You have,
and ultimately can lead to blowouts, loss of equipment and loss of lives.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's what we're trying to prevent.
Exactly. I mean, when you talk about fluid influxes, you get all kinds of additional fluid influxes and kicks before the big kahuna, which Ramon talked about, which we all want to avoid.
Right.
Heaven forbid we have another Macondo.
Right. So when you're kind of listing off, of course, every one of these risk factors has an associated consequence. So what does that look like when we're really trying to understand the ultimate impact that some of the risks that we talked about have on operations and people?
Well, that's a great question. If you look at the graphic here, we've got a kind of a quick summary of just typical illustrations of events that we in DrillSage have gone through and analyzed in conjunction with the companies that actually experienced these events. And so these are real events. It took place. These are real costs. They only consider the direct costs. They do not consider the indirect cost. And a quick glance will show you that there's an awful lot of money on the table that's at risk.
Right. And I know that you and Jeremiah and many others on the team have spent quite a bit of time looking at the data and trying to understand what's been going on from a macro standpoint in the industry. So I kind of wanted to maybe glean a little bit of that insight that you and the team have had. So when we're looking at the industry, what is the overall oil and gas and energy industry done to decrease these incidents? Because I know it's top of mind with DrillSage, NOV, and many others.
Well, this is a very interesting question because it's very complex, because you have to look at the industry holistically. For example, there's a regulatory industry and a regulatory framework here in the United States, which is very different from the regulatory framework in, for example, the North Sea. And the North Sea in particular has been particularly aggressive in implementing regulations that help to address and stipulate how risk is measured, how it is addressed, and regulations to support that framework. We don't have that same environment here, but there are other areas of the world that do. Australia comes to mind, places, believe it or not, like Indonesia. There are other places equally poor in that framework, for example, Russia, and some of the other areas of operation. But you see the dichotomy here. And what we try to do is to provide a framework that is a step change. Because we're a proactive system, we're identifying the causes of problems before they actually become the problem. Now, in 1776 or 1735, I believe it was, Benjamin Franklin said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I maintain that that's more true today than it was when he said it.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, and I like to take that every time I'm doing house projects. I try to take that prevention, and certainly it applies anywhere, inclusive of rig operations.
One other thing that's important to understand is that what DrillSage does, because we're a proactive system, this represents a major departure compared to other systems that are out in the marketplace, because they are reactive based, whereas DrillSage is proactive. Fundamental difference, fundamental step change.
So if you've just joined us, we are talking about ways to improve drilling operations and improve and increase safe operations. And our guests today from DrillSage and here at NOV are helping to shed light on an innovative approach to doing just that. So if you have any questions for our guests, feel free to put them in the comment section, whether you're watching us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, or joining us on Twitter. You can tweet us, and we will try to get as many questions as we can before the end of our show in our Q&A segment. So again, feel free to pose your question for our guest today, and we'll try to get to that as soon as we can in our Q&A section. So Ramon, you've been sitting patiently, and Jeremiah, I'm going to get to you in just one moment. But we talked about, Ramon, at the top of the show, the collaboration with NOV and DrillSage in incorporating this innovative, proactive approach to mitigating some of the operational issues that we see, safety issues that we see during drilling operations. So can you talk a little bit more about what DrillSage and NOV are doing in this space?
Yes, so we have integrated the DrillSage technology into the MD.co rig sense system, which is what the drillers are using to drill those wells. So by integrating it with MD.co's leading-edge data acquisition and data aggregation systems and the DrillSage technology, we're putting that advisory system in front of the driller. A typical implementation includes the MD.co instrumentation, the displays and controls at the rig site, and the integration of the DrillSage displays within it. And there's also another aspect of it, which is the transmission of all of that data outside to the real-time operations center, so there can be an oversight and a second check over the shoulders of what's happening at the rig site.
Yeah.
So it's a very comprehensive
Yeah, I
system.
was going to say, ultimately, I mean, collecting the data is one thing, and that's always on the top of my mind. I mean, I'm nowhere near the expert that you all are, but I know that every time I hear somewhere in the universe someone says, okay, well, we have a system to collect the data, I'm thinking, okay, well, is someone else going to be able to review it? Are we going to be able to get some additional support? So that's good to know that is part of the process and the offering. Jeremiah, I appreciate that your title is development leader, because I have some development questions in terms of getting this solution to customers, NOV customers. How does that process actually work? I know that obviously you've given it a significant amount of thought and time and energy into that. So maybe for those that are interested in trying to understand, okay, how does this cog fit in the overall machine? How does that work?
Sure. It's actually a very big question. There are many different possibilities, because there is so much equipment from NOV, and not every rig is different, not every operator is different. But basically what we've set up is the capability for us to hook up to NOV directly using some systems that we've worked through in collaboration with NOV to build out, and that allows us to directly connect to the NOV system instead of using some of the more traditional yet slower connections like WITSML or some of the other things that exist in the industry. So we're able to pull data directly from NOV and actually send the results of our analysis back to the NOV MD Totco system. And those results are actually made available to the driller instead of coming through another system that has to be opened in another browser or another screen that shows up. We're actually fitting in with the existing footprint that NOV's already put in place.
And I of course, I'm not on the rig right this moment, but when I have been in years past, I think you all hear it more than me. It's how do I reduce the number of screens that I have to have, in the cabin? And so I appreciate, and I know that, customers and potential customers alike will appreciate hearing that it's integrating into, pretty much the hardware that we have. So I think that's a real big advantage and benefit.
Sure. And we focus a lot on making sure that they're focusing on the right thing.
Right.
Making sure that they have the context that is needed, that they're situationally aware of what they need to be aware of. So Jay spoke a lot about, all of these different issues that can happen on a well, drilling safety issues, well control issues. But really, we see it as a hierarchy of issues in general. You start off a lot of times with something small, and if you ignore it, it progresses. So our system actually will catch these things, and on top of that, notify users outside of the system, send escalations as things get worse. I like to say, noticing the problem is only the first step. Mitigating it is really, really where we'll make the difference. And we're building out workflows and processes and procedures to ensure that happens.
That was a great observation and really good words. So I want to stick with you, Jeremiah. So we've talked, about the solution, collaboration, some of the specifics on the technology. So I'm kind of, sort of wrapping around, and again, I like to label it sort of as the so what. So if someone's hearing this and they say, okay, like that's a nice idea and concept and great technology, but ultimately, how is that going to help me? Me being, someone who could potentially incorporate this technology. How is this going to help them, and how do you talk to them?
Sure. Well, I would say, context, situational awareness. Those are the really big things. We are, as an industry, we're really big into working in a silo. Maybe a lot of that is because of the very nature of the system, or I'm sorry, the very nature of the industry where we came from. We were doing very complex things before technology existed to help us a whole lot. And now technology is coming and making many more things available that just weren't possible before. And we fit into that system like a glove. We're made to fit on top of, for instance, NOV's MD Totco system. And I think that's the big value, is bringing in the context, making sure that these issues are actually being looked at and mitigated in some fashion, and giving reporting capabilities on top of that.
So for the astute observer, they might have looked over your shoulder and said, okay, I kind of see a RigSense graphic
Yes.
on the screen. How does that help play a role?
Well, so what you're actually seeing on the screen is the RigSense graphic, and that you're actually seeing a message that comes from the DrillSage system. So this is what the driller would see on location. I mentioned we don't want them to have to open up another screen or another session with, a web browser or something like that. They can always open up the DrillSage system itself, but this is just our way of putting it front and center right in front of their eyes, along with all the other parameters they're already tracking.
Okay. So I know we're starting to wrap up our main conversation before we get to our Q&A. I'm going to jump back over to you, Jesse. One of the phrases that we hear a lot, and for good reason, is 3 letters, many of them. So ESG, so environmental, social, and governance, which really has helped pave the way in many aspects to helping organizations and the, from speaking specifically to the energy industry, helping move forward in a really positive way. So as we're looking at DrillSage, is there an ESG component that is associated with this offering?
There absolutely is. In fact, one of the things that I really like about our DrillSage product is the fact that it has such a large ESG component. When we're able to be implemented as a proactive system, we're able to control how fluids are treated, and by mitigating and minimizing the unplanned release of fluids, by mitigating events and keeping them under control and keeping them from becoming out of control, we have a direct impact on the environment and the associated release of methanes and et cetera, et cetera. By keeping the events in the wellbore from becoming problems, we mitigate and minimize the number of trucks that actually wind up being associated with the drilling operated. We mitigate and minimize the number of releases into the environment, both gaseous and liquid. And so the footprint, because we are a proactive system, that means that we're a very repeatable system. We get consistent results. And so you get this framework of control where you're minimizing your releases, and it continues and propagates forward. And so it continues on ad infinitum. So you have a huge impact in meeting ESG goals.
Right, right, and that's really good. I appreciate the intentionality that was brought into that aspect as well, and I think folks will appreciate that. So we're gonna almost get ready for our Q&A, but before I do, Ramon, I just want to pitch it over to you real quick. For those that might have had a question that we might not be able to get to on air, or maybe they're watching the rebroadcast, best way for them to get information, send an email, how do they do that?
Email us at md.go@nov.com.
Okay, man. I thought you were going to give me like a real complex hoops and loops, but that's pretty simple. So md.co@nov.com.
We are all about efficiency.
That's
at
right.
NOV.
Here we are. That's right. Absolutely. Well, good. All right. Well, thanks, Ramon. And we are going to now go ahead and pivot over to Shelby Dumaine. We are going to get to Q&A, but I think before we do that, we're going to get our... Or actually, no, we are going to do our Q&A.
Yep, Q&A.
Yeah, I know. I wanted to know the answer for the trivia so bad. I was about to jump
I know,
over. But
I know. I'll get that trivia answer to you and to our audience.
I know.
but-
Keep me at bay. I hear you.
Yeah, first for some of our audience questions. So I think this first one actually goes to you, Jeremiah. Can you talk a little bit about, is DrillSage using AI or artificial intelligence at all?
Yes, actually. So I tell people artificial intelligence is a bucket term. But yes, we are using AI and we use machine learning techniques. But I think a very important caveat to that is that we've coupled machine learning techniques and models that you might normally see in a system along with a physics-based system. And so ultimately the decisions that are occurring are not just being driven by machine learning. The system is capable of learning, but it's the low-level analysis that is being performed by the machine learning, and the ultimate decisions for these advisories are occurring on a physics-based system.
So I'd like to add a comment to that, Jeremiah, and is that it means that the system doesn't need training to be effective.
Correct.
From our number one, it'll be working. It doesn't need an army of data scientists behind it to provide you with answers.
Which I think that's a good observation
Yeah.
because, there are some great systems out there that in order to be as effective as advertised means that they need to have that robust initial data set and ongoing learning in order to deliver on deliver as promised.
Right. Yes, we've worked with subject matter experts from the very beginning, very, very experienced engineers and people who have actually lived in operations and drilling, including myself. But even on the development side, we've surrounded ourselves with people who know the operations, and ultimately we've built out exactly what you've said, being able to deploy to a field without needing a lot of data to train the system. However, being able to fine-tune the system as needed for custom requests, something special, we can do that as well. So,
We've deployed all over the world, and we have not changed our core
Right.
one time, not once.
And a little caveat to that is, for instance, gas operators have their own tolerance for some of these thresholds. So some of these alarms that our system does support, maybe not on the proactive side, but on the reactive side, they can be configured and controlled as you might see in a traditional system. But the magic of our system, the proactive piece, that's what doesn't require any maintenance. It doesn't have to be set up for a different field. So.
Excellent, thank you. And this next one, I think it might be maybe for you, Jesse, but of course anybody can answer. Can you talk about how or if DrillSage directly reduces drilling cost and risks?
Okay, we had a slide earlier, but the fact of the matter is, it goes back to Ben Franklin, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Because we're a because we're a proactive system, we identify the conditions that are conducive downhole to creating problems. We identify those problems, and you see the cost case histories there. This is just a small example. There was another slide that showed our watch notification. We actually create notifications similar to like what you would get from the Weather Service. And it's these watches and the notifications and the escalations that go along with them. These things happen automatically. So this is important for a whole variety of reasons, but I'll try to simplify it. This is important to make sure that you take advantage of the ability of the DrillSage system to involve the entire well team. You got to get the right skill set at the right time to be able to make sure that the problem gets addressed before it spins out of control. And that's what our task and our proactive software allows you to do, because it gives you the time and it gives you information to have a discussion about and say, we now have an indication, for example, that we're getting cuttings loading. Well, now, we saw an example where cuttings loading that we were able to identify was taking place in a well. The people who were running the operation were not aware of this. And it increased gradually over time. Well, they got stuck, but they had no idea why. They sent it to us and said, we've looked at it, our experts have looked at it, we have no idea why we got stuck. Why did we get stuck? Well, running it through our RTAS system, we were throwing warnings and watches and notifications 42 hours in advance.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's how the system pays by itself.
Wow.
And
That's-
to the
yeah.
question, because just an incident of losing a drill string means hundreds of thousands of dollars
Right.
lost that can be avoided using the system. So yeah,
Yeah, and especially when you're talking about a day and age where, generally speaking, we all want our operations to be efficient, especially now when you have organizations and in many cases those that are supplying some of the equity who are saying, we're expecting, those operations to continue to increase in efficiency. It sounds like this type of solution can really help bolden that case and drive that need and desire for increased operations and safety, efficiencies,
and
and safety.
ultimately driving costs
Right.
down.
Exactly.
And that's where costs go down.
Exactly.
If you avoid the problem, you don't have to pay for it.
Right.
It's real simple.
Right.
One of the
Excellent.
other things that is important as well is that because of the DrillSage ability to have the notifications, we are addressing the problems of skill levels on the rig, the skills diversity, if you will, between crews, and we're enabling effective engagement of the entire well team before an issue spins out of control.
Right.
Yeah.
And that, I can't emphasize that enough, because anyone you talk to in the business, worldwide, we all understand that the level of expertise in the areas of E&P and especially in drilling are not anywhere where they used to be even 5 years ago.
Very valid.
Oh, that's great. All right, Shelby, I think we have another question.
Yeah, and actually this one comes in, y'all were almost answering some parts of it, so I'm trying to piece together a couple audience questions. Because we got one about if DrillSage is able to detect events like stuck pipe, which I think we talked to and we saw that in the graphic. And then also we got one about if there's any monitoring of shell shakers or maybe shell shaker overload. And so in general, maybe I might pose the question of what different types of events maybe that we haven't mentioned or we could reiterate, can it detect?
So shell shaker overload, that's a big question, and I believe that we can pull some.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Sorry.
we can.
Me and
Yes.
Ramon
Yeah,
are
yeah.
trying to
Yeah,
telepathically
we're looking at each
speak
other's
here.
eyes.
yeah.
So yes, we can do the instrumentation of the shakers and then collect that data and put it into the ARTA system, the DrillSage system, to complement the data sets.
Right. And that actually kind of pivots us to a really important piece of the system, is that this is a framework. You know, we speak about these watches and these alarms that can come to you, these advisories that come to you, but we didn't hard code them. We didn't make very specific watches. We built a system that can continually be scaled up and modified. So as new technology becomes available, as new sensors, new calculations, new curves become available, we can bring that into the fold of the system very easily within the user interface. So if somebody has an idea that we haven't done yet, we are building a system that is built for testing that, and we can couple these operational real-time wells with what we call digital twins that run kind of as a shadow of the real-time operation, and that takes us even further when we're talking about science experiments. If there's something new that nobody's done before, we can run that in parallel without affecting what's happening on the real-time operation. That makes the audit trail cleaner. It makes all of the workflow that's captured in the system a whole lot cleaner. So a little bit of a rant there, but hopefully that's applicable.
Hey, we love it. Yeah, we love rants.
I was going to say,
here,
we'll take a technical
always.
rant any
Yeah,
day
exactly.
long, so, all
Yeah.
day long, so that's great.
Yeah, you won't hear stop from us. So for this next one, can you talk a little bit about, and I think this is maybe to you, Jeremiah, about how DrillSage has already been tested?
Sure. Okay. Well, we've, as Jay said, we've kind of been across the globe at this point. We've been in the North Sea. We've been in Canada, South America, off the coast of Cameroon in Africa. I could go on and on, but there is no lack of testing here. We've also worked with NOV extensively to test our system with their system in collaboration using real-time data, historical data. The system's capable of what we call forensics analysis, which is really a historical analysis capability. And so we've done that to a very large number of wells in collaboration with NOV, and we've also done it internally, kind of as part of our development and design process from the start.
Yeah, that's how we initially started our analysis and testing. Is we worked with several operators to ask them to give us our files that we could test, because until you have a real file, you have a theory, but it takes the actual use of real data on real wells, some good, some bad, to make sure that the theory translates into something that's really actionable and reliable. And the system has shown itself to be extraordinarily reliable.
That's great.
And flexible. I want to add something here, and is that not two drilling operations are the same, and the availability of equipment changes from one to the other. And that turns into different type of data sets. We talk about data, that actually measurement sensors that can be just surface instrumentation, but we can extend the use of the DrillSage system to use downhole measurements, including warp pipe measurements. So it's a very flexible system that takes advantage of the available sensor data to have more refined watches and alarms.
And just to cap that off, development is testing is an integral part of our development life cycle. So these wells that we test against, we continually test against. And as we learn new things, we apply those learnings to those wells.
This is really, really insightful. I think, Shelby, we have maybe one more question in the wings.
Yeah, I think so. And I really wanted to get to this one. It piqued my interest, maybe as a someone who grew up in a hurricane zone in Houston, Texas. But how do weather watches or storm watches work with DrillSage?
Oh, okay. So how is it related?
Yes.
So when we started designing the system, we were looking at different types of advisory systems across the globe, and working with the engineer David Pritchard, we've kind of learned that there is a great system in existence today, and we all know of it, and it's the tornado watch system, the hurricane watch system, the systems that come from National Weather Services. And what they do is they try to identify when the conditions in the atmosphere are conducive to forming a hurricane or forming a tornado. It doesn't mean that a tornado has touched down right now, but it means in this area there is a high risk of that occurring because the environment is in a state that frequently leads to that. And that's really what we're looking at looking at data, how we're looking at data. We're looking for the physics conditions to create an environment that is conducive to creating cuttings loading, that is conducive to creating stuck pipe, et cetera. And so that's what we're identifying proactively, is those warning signs leading to the creation of a bad environment. And getting people notified early and aware is what will curtail the exacerbation of those problems. Anecdotally, I think a couple of weeks ago, we had an issue happening on a real-time well. And it started getting worse and worse. The system automatically escalated, and we went ahead and actually picked up the phone and called on top of what the system was doing automatically. And the drilling superintendent I spoke with was extremely pleased that I called him. Everybody else was already aware, but he was, just wasn't in the loop at that moment. And he was able to get engaged. They were able to make big decisions based off of what was happening anew. And what he said to me afterwards was, I wouldn't have known about this for another 8 hours if we didn't have this system. The same thing happened a year ago. They didn't do anything. They just continued to try to fix it themselves and made the problem way worse. And I think that was, a gold star moment for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's just those elements that you think, okay, well, it's got to be something that's completely, complex, and it's just like some of the most basic elements, having that phone call on top of these warnings, kind of using your analogy. Of course, the system is very robust. DrillSage is very robust, and certainly, like you said, lots of testing and engineering hours going into it. But the concepts behind it are very relatable, and kind of some of the conversation we've had earlier just makes sense. It just makes sense in order to really help capitalize those efficiencies and increase safety in operations. So
And
that's
we
great.
get the weatherman to call you and alert you of the hurricane.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to first off thank our audience for submitting all of those great questions. And of course, thank all of our wonderful guests for answering those. And Michael, I promised you I'd get that trivia answer.
Yeah,
to
I know.
you.
I tried to jump it. So thanks for getting that in.
All right, here we go. So if you were here at the beginning or maybe you missed it, we asked the question earlier in the show, have the number of drilling safety incidents increased or decreased since the Macondo incident? And I don't know that I saw the right answer on there, but I'm sure a lot of our audience knows that the correct answer is increased, actually, believe it or not. And I don't know if y'all wanted to elaborate on that at all, but yeah, so the answer is increased.
One thing I would add about that is that not only have the incidents escalated, but most egregiously, the cost of each incident has skyrocketed. And we're in a much more, I guess you could call it, litigation-aware environment that we've ever been in as an industry. And that applies not only in the U.S., but also across the globe. And with litigation and regulation, these incidents, even they may seem small on a small scale, but they become enormously costly due to direct cost and indirect cost and reputational cost. And all of those factors have to be considered when we look at the total cost of what these incidents can actually be.
Right. So that's a great segue again for capping off our conversation today about a way to help mitigate many of those issues through collaboration with NOV and DrillSage in bringing those solutions to customers. So appreciate it. Shelby, thanks for the help on that. Of course, a thanks to our guests, Ramon Rodriguez with NOV, and with DrillSage, we had Jeremiah Meyers and Jesse Roye, again, talking about DrillSage and safe operations. So want to thank you all for joining us, and certainly want to thank our audience for being a part of today's conversation. If you missed any part of our conversation, you can always head over to nov.com/live, where you can find a replay of this episode as well as many of our previous episodes. Today's guests, as mentioned, were Jeremiah Meyers, Jesse Roye, and Ramon Rodriguez. Handling our social media is Shelby Dumaine. Our production team is Paul Dufio and Wei-Han Lin. I'm Michael Gaines, and on behalf of all of us here at NOV, thanks for watching and for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.